In January, Bartkowski was the most publicized quarterback in college football and the #1 draft choice of the NFL. When he arrived in Atlanta to sign his contract, the 3 TV channels interrupted their programming to announce that his jet had touched down. Last Sunday, in his first game as a pro, Bartkowski skillfully manipulated the Falcon running attack. But when the St. Louis Cardinals stopped the ground game, Bartkowski was forced to pass and not as successful. The furious pass rush and sophisticated zones of pro football have long been the bane of talented young quarterbacks like Steve Bartkowski. Every veteran quarterback who has weathered the corrosive climate of the NFL will explain that learning to decipher the defense is the most difficult task to master.
For me, the toughest aspect with breaking in as a pro quarterback was getting to know the defensive strategies, getting to know what the defense was trying to do, even if it was, at that time, just a few coverages, man-to-man, maybe a zone one way and a zone another way. You still had to learn what they were trying to do to stop you and what your receivers would have to do in order to get open.
Rare indeed are the rookie quarterbacks who achieve stardom in their first season, and rarer still are those who excel in their first game. In fact, most veteran quarterbacks remember their first pro game as only a bittersweet memory.
I think it was about the 3rd preseason game, and up to that time, through, say, 7 weeks of training camp, I was feeling pretty confident that I knew the man-to-man, the difference between man-to-man coverage and zone coverage and weak zone coverage. But we went up against the Packers down in Jacksonville, Florida, and I threw touchdown passes my first 2. But they were to the cornerback of the Packers, Jesse Whitman, and the second one was to Willie Wood, the safety man. They had been practicing and working on a new type of man-to-man coverage, and they caught a rookie right at his weakest moment when he thought he really knew what was going on. He had no idea.
Ironically, the ability to read and to anticipate defensive strategy gave 10-year veteran Jim Hart of the Cardinals the chance to defeat the Falcons. A safety blitz by Atlanta backfired when Hart anticipated the move and beat the blitz with a timely toss to Earl Thomas. Thomas' score added momentum to a Cardinal comeback that ended in a last-second victory when another veteran, 35-year-old Jim Bakken, kicked a 25-yard field goal that spelled defeat for Bartkowski's Falcons 23-20. It was enough to turn a man gray, said Dallas coach Tom Landry after last Sunday's game. St. Louis coach Don Coryell must have agreed, especially when he saw what number 72, Too Tall Jones, and the new improved Dallas Doomsday Machine did to the Cardinals' high-octane offense in the first half. The new Cowboys are indeed a new and curious-looking crew. Gone are familiar figures like Calvin Hill, whose number 35 is now worn by an energetic rookie named Scott Laidlaw. The new-look offense, which once revolved around Hill and Staubach, now revolves around Staubach and a cast of lesser-known but effective players like number 89, tight end Billy Joe Dupree, and wide receiver Drew Pearson, number 88. The offensive machine is not yet at peak efficiency, but last Sunday, Roger Staubach squeezed out enough key plays to put the Cowboys ahead 7-3 at the half. Early in the third quarter, Staubach used first down play action and went for his other wide receiver, Golden Richards, number 83. The catch by Richards put the Cowboys in close, and then it was again time to try Drew Pearson on a route complementary to the unsuccessful post pattern he had run earlier. The wide receiver's precision reception gave Dallas an 11-point lead early in the third period. On the next series, it was time for Jim Hart to turn to his favorite wide receiver, Mercurial Mel Gray, number 85. In just 2 quick plays, this prolific passing combination had the Cardinals right back in the game. On the next series, number 88, motion man Drew Pearson became the middleman in a rare play involving both wide receivers. This spectacle was canceled by a penalty, but 4 plays later, Dallas again led by 11. It took Jim Hart just 1 play to get back in it. Earl Thomas, the Cardinals' other wide receiver, covered 80 yards, and St. Louis again trailed by only 4 at 21-17. But you'd never guess what happened on the following kickoff. Number 56 is linebacker Thomas Henderson from Langston University in Oklahoma, the Cowboys' second pick in the first round of this year's draft. No matter the size of the college, not many 220-pound linebackers run a 9.500. Henderson's touchdown was the 5th consecutive scored by the 2 teams in the third quarter, but Dallas appeared finally to be pulling away. Midway in the fourth quarter, a fumbled punt gave Jim Hart another life. Jackie Smith's score brought St. Louis within a touchdown. With less than a minute to play, Jim Hart again went for his quicksilver wide receiver, Mel Gray. Last year, 11 of the Cardinals' 14 games went to the wire. This year, so far, it's 2 out of 2. But this time, it was sudden death, and 1 mistake could be fatal. That 1 mistake came when, from the Dallas 26-yard line, Jim Hart passed down the middle to Leroy Jordan, who later explained, "The ball just came to me, and Charlie Waters made a good block on the run back. I'm not a very good sprinter, you know." Jordan's return covered 38 yards. And then Roger Staubach took the Cowboys the rest of the way. Just about everybody agreed with Staubach when he stated afterwards, "That was the most exciting game I've ever been in." Final score, St. Louis 31, Dallas 37. Meanwhile, out in St. Louis, the Cardinal offensive line met with much greater success. Dan Deerdorf led the way against the New York Giants from his right tackle position. On this play, Deerdorf post blocks his man to seal off the inside, while guard Conrad Dobler, number 66, pulls and kicks out on the linebacker, providing a funnel of daylight for quick Terry Metcalf, number 21. Metcalf is the type of runner who can make good use of his blocks while running a play that develops his diagram, but when the need arises, can also improvise and adjust. Against New York, Terry Metcalf and the offensive line were an unbeatable combination. When Metcalf wasn't carrying the ball, number 35, Jim Otis, took over. The hole that the offensive line provided was similar, but the style was different. While Metcalf outquicks, Otis overpowers. Otis barreled in to secure a 26-14 St. Louis victory, It was as much a tribute to an excellent offensive line as it was to a couple of young running backs who each gained over 100 yards rushing for the day.
Next on Monday night in Washington, the Cardinals resumed their heart-stopping heroics. 3 times they fell behind, and 3 times they came back to tie on big plays by Mel Gray and Terry Metcalf. But a 17-point tie was broken open in the 4th quarter when Washington scored 10 points to win. With a record of only 2-2 after 4 games, the Cardinals' ability to win their division was very much in doubt.
Poor execution, fumbles, and bopped passes plagued Roman Gabriel's offense, as only twice did the Eagles emerge from their labyrinth of mental errors to enter the St. Louis end zone. And as the Eagles were destined to learn, a sputtering 2-touchdown offense would offer little contest to the consistent, balanced offensive machine that St. Louis Cardinal quarterback Jim Hart directed last Sunday. Even if it was a back-to-basics day for the big play Cardinals, anytime number 21 Terry Metcalf has the football, it's always entertaining. And when Metcalf wasn't employed, a ponderous fullback named Jim Otis rumbled through the Eagle defenders. Carrying 23 times for 116 yards, Otis scored the Cardinals' first touchdown and set up the second one with a rampaging pop up the middle. Shortly thereafter, St. Louis quarterback Jim Hart squeezed off a 6-point salvo to Jackie Smith in the Eagle end zone. The 13-year veteran made his only other pass reception of the day an important one also, as this 39-yarder was soon followed by a field goal. There was little need for mega plays last Sunday, however, as the Cardinals' ground offensive ravenously consumed Eagle territory. Once in close, the reckless and raw power of Jim Otis was aimed successfully at the Philadelphia end zone to claim a commanding 24-10 lead. But the Cardinals had not concluded their back-to-basics revival, and while the uniform numbers were different in the 4th quarter, the game plan was not. Running almost at will through the Eagles' flagging defenses, number 34, Steve Jones, reaped his share of 278-yard rushing harvest the Cardinals claimed for the day. Appropriately enough, the game's last play unfolded as a Cardinal touchdown run by number 27, Eddie Moss, who busted his way into the Philadelphia end zone to finalize a 31-20 victory. For the Eagles, it marked yet another cause for demoralization, while for St. Louis, victory meant a newfound balance and consistency.
Last year, the Cardinals snuck up on many teams because, unlike the Rams and Redskins, they were not regarded as contenders, much less champions. But now, opposing teams' playbooks are stocked with tricks designed to fool a suspect St. Louis defense. Even though they hit hard and often, the Cardinals' defense leaks. A fact made quite evident by the Giants' Craig Morton, who sprayed their secondary with 2 touchdown passes. But St. Louis usually outscores their defensive mistakes because of Don Coryell's imaginative leadership and a wealth of talent on offense. The most glorious Cardinal is number 21 Terry Metcalf, a setback showered by accolades and endowed with immense ability. He is a drive wheel in St. Louis's delicately balanced offense. Metcalf is fronted by a superb line. Conrad Dobler, number 66, is a pulling guard who paves the way for Terry on power sweeps. So conscious were the Giants of a Metcalf sweep that the threat of it opened up an easy touchdown pass to Mel Gray, number 85. Quarterback Jim Hart was sacked for the first time in 6 games by blitzing linebacker Pat Hughes, number 56. But Hart's superb protection and deep drop allow him to exploit the vulnerable middle of zone defenses where the Quicksilver Cardinal receivers have a chance to show why their offense ranks first in the NFC. The Cardinals outlasted New York 20-13 as Mel Gray caught his 12th touchdown pass in 11 games against the Giants. No, St. Louis no longer creeps up on teams. They just whistle past them like the wind.
When Chuck Fairbanks coached at Oklahoma, wishbone quarterbacks fell out of trees. But in the pros, you can't recruit 7 high school All-Americans a year to fuel your offense. And with Jim Plunkett injured, Fairbanks limps along with rookie Steve Grogan, number 14. Without Plunkett or a running game, Fairbanks' Patriots rely on the pass, a strategy his Sooners employed once every full moon. However, in number 84, Darrell Stingley, and number 18, Rabbit Vataha, the passing game rests in good hands. A healthy offense is not the problem of St. Louis head coach Don Coryell. His old San Diego State teams used to rank first in offense, and now so do his Cardinals. Number 21, Terry Metcalf, was personally drafted by Coryell because he annually destroyed his Aztecs with coast-to-coast plays like this one against New England. Metcalf's 69-yard touchdown was the Cardinals' first score, and with the game in the balance, he scored their last on a gritty 7-yard sweep. While Don Coryell's high-octane Cardinals won 24-17, 2 coaches with underpowered defenses clashed in New York.
Jim Hart may be the cause for a rash of interceptions he has suffered this season, a total that already exceeds his league-leading low of last year. Hart explains why he's being sacked less but intercepted more.
It's a change in number 17. Is just blowing some of the passes, that's all. It's not changing any philosophy of ours at all. We started the season, the first half of the season anyway, we had a very good record going for quarterback sacks. And I must admit that perhaps subconsciously I was thinking about protecting that record. And what I was doing, instead of giving our offensive line the credit, I was really discrediting them in saying that they can't hold them out long enough, so I'm dumping the balls too soon. So then after we got a couple sacks against the Giants, we just said, you know, scrap all that nonsense. Let's go back to throwing the ball like we know how.
Setting up behind the safest offensive line in the NFL, Hart has only been sacked twice in 8 games. The NFL record is 8 for an entire season. In last Sunday's come-from-behind win over the Eagles, Jim Hart took full advantage of his protection. He unleashed passes that spiraled out for over 200 yards and 1 touchdown for his Cardinals. The Cards lead the NFC in total offense and have proven scoring potential. Thus far, their biggest problems have been on defense. Although many opponents have celebrated in the Cardinal end zone this season, the Big Red defense has shown a flair for coming up with performances which are a must for a contender. All-Pro cornerback Roger Worley's interception turned back 1 Eagle threat, and 2 second-half Cardinal touchdowns set the stage for veteran kicker Jim Bakken, who lined up from 30 yards out with one last chance to boot the Cardinals to victory. The kick was good and helped the Cardinals retain their first-place tie with this week's foe, the Washington Redskins. And for the second time this season, a Jim Bakken field goal in the final seconds had provided St. Louis with the victory. The value of having an unshakable pro like the 14-year veteran had again proved to be invaluable to a team vying for contention and their confident coach, Don Coryell.
George Allen is vexed by a different problem than Tom Landry. His offense is apt to stub its toe, and weekly it must be bailed out by his defense. Allen's nickel defense is lined with interchangeable parts, but laden with one golden player, linebacker Chris Hamburger, number 55. Behind a stunting, looping line, Hamburger blitzes down a path of least resistance and sets the tempo for Redskin turnovers. 6 weeks ago, Hamburger and his mates grew fat and happy on dumb St. Louis mistakes. And in the rematch, the Cardinals proved just as charitable. Redskin cornerbacks funneled the fleet St. Louis receivers into the middle, where deep help was provided by safety Ken Houston, number 27. With Billy Kilmer injured, the Redskin offense became more daring under Randy Johnson, who tried to strong-arm passes to his double-covered outside receivers. With the wide receivers denied the sidelines, Johnson found a sure route to success by dumping throws over the middle to tight end Jerry Smith, number 87. This strategy forced St. Louis to shore up the heart of their secondary and set up the old post corner move by tried and true Charlie Taylor, number 42. Taylor's role in the Washington offense cannot be overestimated. He is doubly valuable down deep, where his decoy patterns open the field for running backs like Mike Thomas, number 22. The Cardinals, like the Cowboys, don't defeat teams. They outscore them, and most of their games are not decided until the final gun. Against St. Louis, not even a big lead is safe, and when a team denies them the bomb, the Cardinals go underneath, where Mel Gray turns the secondary's cleats into ice skates. St. Louis crept back into the game when Hart connected with J.V. Kane dead in stride for 6 points as the Cardinals trailed Washington 17-10. With 25 seconds remaining, it was 4th and goal at the 7. Jim Hart pointed to Chris Hamburger, number 55, and alerted his team for a blitz. Hart's plan was to flood the extremities of the end zone with everyone but Mel Gray. The ball, Gray, and Pat Fisher met in simultaneous rendezvous, and so did controversy. While one official indicated an incomplete pass and the Redskins trotted off joyously, the Cardinals collected to dispute the call and circle the officials like wild-eyed Indians around a wagon train. With the Redskins claiming victory and St. Louis shouting tie game, the officials huddled under a full moon where strange things can happen. And suddenly, as Lon Chaney turned into a werewolf, the game turned into a 17-all tie. The Cardinals won the toss and relentlessly trudged after sudden victory as Washington slashed and tore at the ball. At the 20, the game was put in trust to Jim Bakken, whose flutter ball sailed St. Louis into undisputed first place in the NFC East. Tiny Terry Metcalf led the robust St. Louis running attack into Shea Stadium, figuring to find a soft touch in the demoralized New York Jet defense. But sometimes in a battle of contrast, the underdogs will lash out in frustration and play over their heads. New York came out strong to take an early 3-0 lead. Then their success made them too daring. Linebacker John Ebersole and safety Dallas Howell planned a risky double blitz, but Terry Metcalf split the gap into a wide-open secondary. Metcalf's touchdown put the game back in proper perspective, and number 17, Jim Hart, added his part with a bombing run through the wide-open spaces of the New York deep zone. Mercurial Mel Gray scored twice, and Jim Hart retired after 3 quarters with some impressive stats. 11 for 13 for 242 yards. The other, more widely known quarterback didn't fare so well. Living legend Joe Namath leads the NFL in only one category for 1975, interception. His 22nd of the season was carried back 61 yards by Norm Thompson to close out a 37-6 St. Louis victory that kept the Cardinals solidly on top in the Eastern Division. Unlike the teams we've just seen, the problems for Lou Saban's Buffalo Bills lie not with their league-leading offense, but with their bottom-ranked pass defense. And on Thanksgiving Day, Jim Hart and his big play St. Louis Cardinals were supposed to make merry at their expense. And sure enough, number 21, Mr. Wonderful Terry Metcalf set up the game's first touchdown and ran his season's total offense over 2,100 yards, on his way to the all-time record. But then, suddenly, the cardiac Cardinals seemed themselves to be stricken, as the NFC's leading offense turned the ball over no less than 7 times. The Cardinals' 6-game winning streak ended, not because their defense couldn't stop league-leading quarterback Joe Ferguson, and not because they couldn't stop league-leading rusher O.J. Simpson, but because they couldn't stop 240-pound fullback Jim Braxton, who had his best day ever with 160 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an easy victory over surprisingly flat St. Louis. It helps to stay fit if you expect to keep the pace in the NFC's Eastern Division. For the second straight year, the Washington Redskins, the Dallas Cowboys, and the St. Louis Cardinals were engaged in a down-to-the-wire dogfight for 2 playoff spots, and St. Louis strongman Conrad Dobler wanted to be ready. Last week's most crucial matchup pitted Don Coryell's 8-3 Cardinals against Tom Landry's 8-3 Cowboys, and the great game possibilities made everybody smile. Quarterback Jim Hart was testing a tender knee under scrutiny of the Dallas Cowboys. In the previous 11 meetings between the two teams, Dallas had won 9 times, and the confident Cowboys looked to a wealth of big game experience to pull them through once again. St. Louis hopes rested with a gimpy-kneed quarterback and a gently lofted prayer. Somehow, the prayer escaped 3 Dallas defenders and nestled snugly in the grateful grasp of terrific Terry Metcalf. Metcalf couldn't quite believe that one himself, but Jim Hart was on the right track, and there was nothing sloppy about touchdown number 2. Tiny Mel Gray took his turn in the end zone as the eager Cardinals gratefully accepted a surprising early advantage. A repeat documents the classic NFL bomb. Hart simply threw the ball as far as he could, and Mel Gray outran everybody in a blue shirt. The St. Louis bombing run set a tempo that Cowboy quarterback Roger Staubach was unable to match. Without a consistent pass rush from the front 4 all season, St. Louis depends on team defense, like a surprise double blitz to keep an opponent off balance. With Staubach properly confused, Jim Hart continued to chew up the Dallas defense with impeccable pass protection from an offensive line that has allowed him to be sacked only 6 times all season. The hands belong to Ike Harris, a 4th-round draft choice in '74 who played instead in the WFL. Harris finally came to St. Louis this season and soon took a starting position away from Earl Thomas with catches like this one. Hart to Harris set up a just enough touchdown vault by number 34, Steve Jones. And amazingly, the St. Louis Cardinals took a 28-3 halftime lead over the unbelieving Dallas Cowboys. There have been many seemingly hopeless predicaments in Cowboy history, and almost as many impossible comebacks. So when Roger Staubach shifted back into his shotgun to start the second half, you had to believe anything could happen. What appeared was the ghost of Roger the Dodger, the Heisman Trophy winner of 1964, complete with the U.S. Naval Academy jump pass. With nothing to lose, Staubach opened things up and the Cowboys began to move down the field, working the middle with tight end Billy Joe Dupree, number 89, and then swinging outside to running back Robert Newhouse, number 44. In the second half alone, Staubach completed 18 of 29 for 222 yards. And when he couldn't throw, there were other ways to get the job done. In the late afternoon chill of Busch Stadium, Staubach passed and scrambled Dallas back into contention as 2 touchdowns shrunk the Cardinal lead to 11 points. But Dallas had started this comeback too late. Time was running out, and Staubach was forced to throw nearly every play into a swarming prevent defense. The result was inevitable. Cornerback Roger Worley ended 2 fourth-quarter threats with goal line interceptions to nail down a solid 31-17 St. Louis victory and vault the Cardinals into sole possession of first place in the NFC East. The victory, plus a Detroit loss, clinched a second consecutive playoff berth for a team that didn't learn to win until Don Coryell arrived from San Diego State with a plan. Now, terrific Terry Metcalf and the Cardinals are anxious to show the world that the best is yet to come.
In Chicago, the track was slower, but the horses were just as fast. Number 80, Bo Rather, turned a flanker screen into a 50-yard burn for 6 points. The Bears' nemesis was number 35, Jim Otis, who gained 145 yards and joined John David Crow as the Cardinals' only 1,000-yard runners. Compared to a stallion like Terry Metcalf, Otis is a dray horse, but his heavy-duty running has kept St. Louis in first place in the NFC East. Balanced is the beauty of the Cardinal attack, and with number 81, Jackie Smith, healthy, the St. Louis offense is brutal. The Cardinal roster is talent-rich. Subbing for Terry Metcalf, Steve Jones, number 34, scored twice and helped St. Louis bury the Bears 34-20.
Against Detroit in the season's 14th game, Terry Metcalf returned to the lineup and set an NFL record for net yardage. Jim Otis won the NFC rushing title, breaking a team record while doing it. Against the Lions, rookie Jerry Latin became the third Big Red runner to go over 100 yards in a game. It included the longest run of the season in the NFC, as the Cardinals won their 11th game, most ever in St. Louis, and matching the record of the 1925 and 1948 Chicago Cardinals. The playoff game against the Rams was the last game for the Cardinals. Following the finest season in St. Louis history, the team laid an egg in Los Angeles. 2 interceptions returned for touchdowns were the key plays as the Rams erupted for 28 points in the first half. Throughout the game, there were ample signs that this indeed was not to be the Cardinals' day. The odds were overwhelmingly against them, as they had all season. The Cardiac Cards refused to give up and came roaring back on the wings of their explosive offense. But the Los Angeles lead was insurmountable, and for the second straight year, the Cardinals season had come to a sudden, disappointing end in the playoffs.